Every generation thinks it just watched the greatest individual season the sport has ever produced. And for most of baseball history, that claim has been comparing apples to completely different fruit. A slugger's season against a burglar's season on the base paths. A pitcher's season against a two-way freak nobody had a stat category ready for. There's no scoreboard for this argument, no committee that settles it, and no single number that fairly compares a 400 batting average to 130 stolen bases to an ERA under 2. All anyone can really do is lay the candidates side by side and see whose season breaks the most rules simultaneously. And in one case on this list, that's not a figure of speech. The rules themselves genuinely had to be rewritten, twice, 5 years and 1 ocean apart, just to let one player's season count the way it deserved to. 7 seasons. 7 completely different ways to be the best that has ever existed. Let's start with the one that convinced an entire country to change its own rule book first. Ohtani, 2016, Japan. Before any of this reached American soil, it started in Japan, in a league scouts generally ranked a notch above AAA. In 2016, a 22-year-old pitcher-hitter for the Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters batted .322 with a .416 on-base percentage and 22 home runs across 382 plate appearances, while also going 10-4 with a 1.86 ERA and 174 strikeouts across 140 innings on the mound. By season's end, independent statistical analysis credited him with roughly 10.4 wins above replacement combined across both roles, split almost evenly, about 4.6 from his bat and 5.8 from his arm. A combined figure in the range of the best single-season totals any MLB position player has ever posted, produced by one player doing 2 jobs at once. The league had never actually built a mechanism to honor a season like this, so it changed its own rules mid-year to make room for one. NPB's Best 9 award, the Japanese equivalent of an all-star starting lineup honor, had never allowed a pitcher to also be recognized as the league best hitter. The categories simply weren't designed to overlap. The league adjusted the eligibility specifically so he could be considered at both positions, and he won both anyway, becoming the first player in either Japanese league's history to be named Best 9 as a pitcher and as a designated hitter in the same season. His margin of victory wasn't close in either category, nearly double the next closest vote total among pitchers and more than triple the runner-up among designated hitters. Put the 2 sides of that season next to a rough American translation and the scale of it becomes easier to grasp. His batting line that year would have stacked up against the best pure hitters active in MLB at the time. His 1.004 OPS trailed only David Ortiz's league-leading mark across the entire sport that season. His pitching line would have stacked up against the era's best starters too. Nobody in MLB posted an ERA as low as his 1.86 that same year. He wasn't merely good enough at both to justify the role. He was, in the same 12 months, arguably a top hitter and a top pitcher in professional baseball, full stop, before subtracting anything for doing both at once. The rest of the season played out like a highlight reel, daring the league to keep up. He won the NPB Home Run Derby that summer, then broke the all-time Japanese record for fastest pitch thrown, hitting 100.9 miles per hour on a stadium radar gun. He hit a ball that struck the roof of the Tokyo Dome, one of the more unusual home run stories the ballpark has ever produced. And when the season ended, his team won the Japan Series, the NPB's championship, with their 2-way star recognized as the Pacific League's most valuable player. It's the season that first forced American scouts and executives to take the 2-way player idea seriously as something more than a gimmick. Proof 3,000 miles from Anaheim that the concept actually worked at an elite level before a single MLB team had any contractual claim on him. At the time, almost nobody outside dedicated NPB coverage in the English-language press was paying close attention, which is part of what makes the season worth resurrecting here. The numbers existed. The record-breaking velocity existed. The championship existed. All of it happened in a league most casual American fans still associate with a lower tier of professional baseball, which means the actual size of the achievement took years to fully register with the audience that would eventually watch him do a version of it again, this time with the entire sport paying attention from the very pitch. Babe Ruth, 1921. To find the season most American historians point to as the actual blueprint for greatest ever, go back 100 years on the other side of the Pacific. Babe Ruth's 1921 batting line reads almost like a typo, a .378 average, 59 home runs, 171 RBI, an .846 slugging percentage, and 177 runs scored, a mark that still stands as the modern-era record a full century later. His 457 total bases that season also remains a record no player has approached since. He led the American League in nearly every meaningful offensive category simultaneously, by margins large enough that the rest of the league looked like it was playing a slower version of the same sport. The number that gets lost in the shuffle is 12.8. Ruth's wins above replacement that season, a figure few hitters in the century since have come anywhere close to matching in a single year. It was also the third year in a row he had broken his own single-season home run record, going from 29 to 54 to 59 in 3 consecutive seasons, an escalation no other hitter in the sport's history has ever matched. Some researchers who've spent decades studying the ballparks and conditions of the era argue that under modern stadium dimensions, Ruth's 1921 power output would have translated into triple-digit home runs, a claim impossible to verify, but impossible to dismiss outright given how far ahead of his own league he was already playing. Context makes the gap even stranger. In an era before radar guns, video review, or advanced scouting reports of any kind, Ruth was doing something no hitter of his generation had a framework to even understand, let alone counter. Opposing pitchers had no real precedent for a hitter this powerful, which meant Ruth wasn't just outperforming the league statistically, he was breaking assumptions about what a human swing was even capable of producing in front of crowds that had never seen anything like it. Ted Williams, 1941. If Ruth's case rests on power, the next challenger's case rests on precision. In 1941, Ted Williams batted .406 for the season, the last time any player has finished a full season above .400, a mark that has now gone unmatched for over 8 decades. He also posted a .553 on-base percentage that stood as the single-season record for 6 decades afterward. Reached base in a staggering share of his plate appearances, and did it all while adding 37 home runs, a power total that made the average look even more absurd by comparison. The detail that makes this season sting in hindsight is that Williams still didn't win the MVP that year, finishing second to a Yankee center fielder whose 56-game hitting streak captured the public's imagination more than a decimal point batting average ever could. Nearly every serious statistical ranking of single seasons since has argued Williams' case belongs at or near the top of the list, full stop. No era adjustment required. And yet the actual vote that year didn't even go his way. What makes the .406 mark even more remarkable is how close Williams came to simply protecting it instead of playing for it. Entering the final day of the season with his average already rounding up to an even .400, he could have sat out a season-ending doubleheader and locked in the milestone on paper. He chose to play both games anyway, went 6 for 8 on the day, and pushed the number up rather than down, a legendary statistic built by someone actively risking it instead of protecting it. 80-plus years of the sport's best hitters, armed with better nutrition, better training facilities, and video analysis of every pitch they'll ever see, still haven't produced a single season that clears the exact threshold Williams cleared in 1941. Entire hitting careers have been built and finished in the decades since without a single player getting within 20 points of that average across a full season, which is a genuinely different kind of rarity than a home run or stolen base record that at least gets approached periodically. Barry Bonds, 2001. Move the clock forward 80 years, and the power record itself finally fell. Barry Bonds hit 73 home runs in 2001, the most anyone has ever hit in a single major league season, breaking a mark that had only been set 3 years earlier, and it had itself felt untouchable. He did it while also posting an on-base percentage north of 500 and a slugging percentage over 860, meaning the raw power record wasn't even the most extreme number in his own season that year. What separates Bonds' power surge from every prior home run record is how late in his career it arrived. Ruth set his marks in his mid to late 20s, the traditional physical peak for a professional athlete. Bonds broke the single-season home run record at 36, an age at which most sluggers in the sport's history are already several years into a visible decline, precisely the detail that fuels most of the skepticism still attached to the number today. He would go on to top even his own on-base record 3 years later, reaching 609 in 2004, a season so absurd that opposing teams essentially decided the safest strategy was to stop pitching to him at all whenever a base was open. Both Bonds' seasons remain entangled with the sport's steroid era, in a way no other name on this list is, which is exactly why his case, despite the sheer size of the numbers, remains the most contested entry on the entire list. That controversy is precisely why Bonds' case is structurally different from every other name here. Ruth, Williams, Martinez, and Henderson all have their records treated as settled history, debated on merit alone. Bonds' 73 home runs sit in the record book with an asterisk that isn't printed anywhere on the page, but exists in nearly every conversation about the number anyway. Proof that in this particular argument, the size of the achievement and the willingness to accept it as legitimate aren't always the same thing. It's worth pointing out just how narrow the previous record's lifespan actually was before Bonds broke it. Mark McGwire had set the mark at 70 just 3 years earlier, in a home run chase so famous the entire country tracked it on the nightly news for months. 3 seasons later, that same record, one that had felt like it might stand for a generation, was already gone, swallowed by a number nobody had seriously projected as reachable so soon after the previous one fell. Pedro Martinez, 2000. Every season so far belongs to a hitter. This one belongs entirely to a pitcher, and it might be the single most dominant relative to its own era of anything on this list. In 2000, Pedro Martinez posted a 1.74 ERA in a season where the American League as a whole averaged nearly 5.00, meaning Martinez wasn't just better than everyone else. He was pitching in what amounted to a completely different sport than the rest of the league that summer. His ERA+, the metric that adjusts a pitcher's ERA against the league and ballpark he pitched in, came out to 291, the highest mark by any starting pitcher in over a century of modern baseball. The individual numbers inside that season are almost comedic in how one-sided they are. Martinez struck out 284 batters while walking only 32, allowing just 128 hits across 217 innings, more than twice as many strikeouts as hits allowed, something no starting pitcher had ever done before. His whip of 0.74 broke a record that had stood since 1923. The season's runner-up in ERA makes the gap even funnier. Roger Clemens, a Hall of Fame pitcher in his own right, finished with the league's second-best ERA at 3.70, more than double Martinez's mark, and closer to the league's 38th best ERA that year than it was to Martinez's own number. The era he pitched in is exactly what makes the case so strong. This was the height of a period when offense across the entire sport was exploding. Home run totals were setting records nearly every year, and pitchers across both leagues were getting hit harder than at almost any other point in the sport's history. Martinez didn't just survive that environment. He posted numbers that would have been extraordinary in the pitcher-friendly decades that came before it, while doing it directly in the middle of the most hitter-friendly stretch the sport had seen in generations. He also did it half his games in one of the most notoriously difficult ballparks in the sport for a pitcher to succeed in, a stadium whose short outfield dimensions have punished pitching staffs for the better part of a century. Most pitchers who call that park home learn to accept a slightly inflated ERA as the cost of doing business there. Martinez's numbers included that home field disadvantage, not despite it, which makes the final tally even harder to explain by any conventional measure of what a pitcher's environment should have allowed.
Rickey Henderson, 1982. Then the season that redefined an entire dimension of the game nobody else on this list touches: pure chaos on the base paths. In 1982, Rickey Henderson stole 130 bases, a single-season record that still stands today by a margin of 12 over the next closest total in the modern era. He reached the 100 steal mark by early August, faster than any player in history, and finished the season having personally stolen more bases than all but a handful of entire teams managed collectively that same year. Every team in the league knew before every pitch exactly what Henderson intended to do the moment he reached base, and it didn't matter. Pitchers varied their timing, catchers set up early, entire defensive strategies were built specifically around denying him a lead, and he still broke the record by a wider margin than the previous record holder had broken the one before that. Here's the strange twist buried inside this entry. By some deeper statistical measures, 1982 isn't actually considered Henderson's most valuable individual season, because his batting average and power numbers that year were relatively modest, and the raw value added by stolen bases, once caught stealing outs or subtracted, turns out smaller than the eye-popping total suggests. It's the one season on this list where the record itself is completely undisputed, and yet its case for greatest ever is the shakiest of all 7. The margin over everyone else who's ever attempted it is almost hard to process. Only 3 other players in the modern era have even reached 100 stolen bases in a single season, and none of them got within 30 of Henderson's total. In the 25 years since 2000, not a single player has stolen even half of what Henderson stole in 1982, which means an entire generation of the fastest players in the sport's history has spent 2.5 decades not even approaching the midpoint of what one 23-year-old did in a single summer.
Ohtani, 2021, America. Which brings the argument back to where it started, 5 years in one ocean later, with proof the 2016 season wasn't a fluke of a smaller league. In 2021, the same player, now with the Los Angeles Angels, hit 46 home runs, stole 26 bases, and led all of baseball in triples, while also taking the mound 23 times, striking out 156 batters with a 3.18 ERA. His overall wins above replacement of 9.1 led every player in the sport, hitters and pitchers combined. Every single MVP voter that year put his name in first place, unanimous. The season opened with a preview of exactly what was coming. In his very first pitching start of the year, he hit 100 miles per hour on the radar gun in the top of the first inning, then came up to bat in the bottom of that same inning and crushed a home run that traveled over 450 feet. the first time an American League starting pitcher had homered against an opposing team since before the designated hitter rule even existed. By mid-season, the two-way case had become impossible to argue around, so the league let him do both jobs on the same weekend in front of the entire sport. He entered the Home Run Derby the night before the All-Star Game, then started the game itself as the American League's pitcher and stayed in the lineup to hit as well. The first time in the exhibition's history that one player had been selected as the starting pitcher and the starting hitter in the same game. The two seasons, 5 years apart, tell the same story on two different continents. In 2016, an entire league had to rewrite its own award rules just to describe what he'd done. In 2021, an entire sport had to invent a brand new trophy, the Commissioner's Historic Achievement Award, for the same reason. Nobody else on this list ever needed a rule changed or an award invented just to be properly measured, which might be the single clearest sign of how far outside the sport's existing categories this particular case for greatest season ever actually sits. 7 seasons, 7 completely different sports hiding inside the same box score. Pure power, pure average, pure pitching dominance, pure chaos on the bases, and one player who did it twice, 5 years and one ocean apart. Well enough both times to make the others look almost conventional by comparison. There's no clean way to rank a batting average against an ERA against a stolen base total, or a Japanese league against an American one. That's exactly why this argument has never actually been settled, and exactly why the same name occasionally shows up twice on the same list, with a real claim to the throne both times. Notice, too, how differently each of these 7 seasons aged. Ruth's and Williams's marks are treated as sacred, untouchable history. Bonds's is treated with an asterisk that follows the number everywhere it goes. Henderson's is undisputed on paper, but quietly second-guessed by anyone who digs into the deeper math. Martinez's, by contrast, has only grown in stature the more advanced pitching metrics have caught up to actually measuring what he did. And the 2 Ohtani seasons are still being written in real time. Every year he manages to stay on both sides of the ball at once, which means, unlike every other entry on this list, his argument for greatest ever was never a fixed target frozen in one specific summer. It's a moving one, still being built on 2 continents, with the strange possibility that some future season of his might end up being the actual answer to a question 2016 only first proved was worth asking. Thanks for going through all 7 with us. If one of these finally gave you an answer to argue with your friends about, drop a like and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel keep making these. And if you're into the sport's most argued about debates, go check out our last one, Every MVP Controversy Explained, and the award nobody can agree on the actual rules for.